I knew things were headed straight into hell the morning I walked into the office and found my name missing from the weekly dev sync. Not crossed out, not replaced, just gone, like I'd never existed. Like the last 10 years of my life, every 3 a.m. patch, every Christmas morning deployment, every bug fix I shoved out while eating dry ramen at my desk had just evaporated in some lazy Google Doc revision. My coffee hadn't even cooled before the new CTO, Damon, slinked in with that smug Bay Area energy, tight jeans, $900 hoodie, and the kind of grin you earn only by failing upward through 3 failed startups funded by your uncle's VC firm. He clapped his hands like he was about to announce recess. All right, folks, he beamed. This quarter's all about speed. No more band-aids. We're rewriting the entire reconciliation engine from scratch. Legacy code is a liability. If we don't innovate, we die. I took a slow sip of my coffee and counted to 5. Because Damon, bless his buzzword-choked little heart, had just declared war on the only thing standing between our clients and a $1 billion regulatory fine. My code, my system. The one I built when he was still pitching pitch decks on napkins at craft beer meetups. Quick pause if you've made it this far. Chances are you're exactly the kind of person who loves a good revenge arc. And trust me, this one burns slow and hits hard. So if you're one of the 90% just eavesdropping without clicking subscribe, do me a solid. Hit the button, toss us a like. It keeps the story flowing and the team caffeinated. All right, back to the collapse. So Damon starts assigning junior devs to rewrite modules they've never touched. Kids who still confuse data consistency with coffee consistency. And when I say kids, I mean people who refer to me as ma'am and use words like vibe check and stand up. He gives one of them the reconciliation thread, my thread, and tells him to modernize it. No code review, no dependencies chart, just vibes. I kept quiet. I documented every change, every regression, every optimization that caused our nightly jobs to hiccup and fart out nonsense like $0 and 0 cents trades from Deutsche or duplicated settlement logs in the Tokyo window. I sent polite emails, annotated bug reports. I even made a colorful diagram labeled why this will blow up in our faces and attached it to the Slack channel named #devfun. No one reacted. Damon marked it with a thumbs up emoji. The best part, he started calling my modules the swamp. As in, we're draining the swamp. One morning, I walked into a team huddle again, not invited, and heard him say, we're replacing Evelyn's logic with a real-time microservice stack. It's going to be cleaner, faster, and actually usable. I smiled, nodded, jotted that down too. What none of them realized, what Damon in all his beard oil-slicked glory never thought to check, was that I wasn't just the author of that code base. I was its last line of defense. Legally, technically, contractually. See, back in 2014, before Parallax got acquired, I negotiated a clause in my employment contract. Any architecture-level change required a sign-off from the original system owner. Me. That was back when I was still naive enough to think companies valued institutional knowledge. Joke's on them, I never let legal rewrite that clause. Every time they tried. Buried it deeper under compliance checklists, tech debt logs, and obscure JIRA tickets labeled Evelyn's doctrine do not delete. The only thing standing between Parallax and a full-blown collapse was my unwillingness to trust anyone else to press the big red button. But Damon didn't read contracts. He read Medium posts about disrupting yourself before someone else does. And somewhere between quoting Steve Jobs and mispronouncing Kafka, he decided I was in the... So I smiled wider, and I waited, because the thing about old code, it remembers every patch, every hack, every bypass someone slips in thinking they're clever. And mine was very clever. It happened on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Tuesdays are when the universe rolls its eyes and hands you a flaming bag of betrayal wrapped in corporate stationery. I got the calendar invite at 9:02 a.m., subject line, performance realignment check-in. No details. Just a beige block of digital dread dropped between back-to-back meetings like a fart in an elevator. Location, Damon's office. Attendees, Damon, me, and Janine from HR, whose personality could best be described as unsalted compliance. I walked in. Damon didn't even pretend to minimize his email. Just gestured to the chair across from him with the kind of faux compassion you learn at tech bro retreats where they teach empathy via improv. I'll just jump it. At all false brightness and MacBook arrogance. We've been doing some soul searching at the leadership level, and look, Evelyn, you've done a lot here. A lot, but the company's evolving. We need to align the team with a new velocity mindset. I didn't blink, I didn't speak. Just raised one eyebrow like I was waiting for him to remember how verbs work. That's why, he continued, we're transitioning your role into something more streamlined. With automation and AI. Our legacy systems are becoming, well, legacy people too. It's not personal. He paused, searching my face for some kind of emotion. Rage, tears, even confusion. But all he got was a nod. You seem okay, he said, suddenly unsure of his own script. You said what you needed to say, I replied, folding my hands in my lap. No need to waste anyone's time. That rattled him more than I expected. Maybe he'd prepped for a fight, a meltdown. Maybe he thought I'd grovel or cite metrics or remind him that the Parallax engine was literally my brain turned into software. But instead, I sat there like I was already elsewhere, because I knew this was the moment I'd been preparing for down to the second. He fumbled for his closer. It's just happiness isn't something we fix, Evelyn. It's something we replace. We're replacing unhappiness with innovation. I swear to God. He actually leaned back like he'd dropped a mic. Janine slid over a bland manila folder and started reading from the transition script. I half listened as she laid out the severance package like a morgue assistant prepping a body bag. 2 weeks' pay, health insurance through the end of the month. Blah, blah, blah. She pronounced proprietary systems like she thought it meant printer ink. At exactly 9:24, my security badge was revoked. My Slack token expired mid-scroll. The Wi-Fi kicked me off with a chirpy message. User not found. No offboarding checklist. No code review. No handoff meeting. No one asked about the module flags I'd embedded. No one questioned why the reconciliation engine had a 4-tier failsafe that only I ever touched. Damon just stood, shook my hand like he'd sold me a timeshare in hell, and said, "No hard feelings." I left my ID badge on the table and walked out without looking back. Because looking back is for people who think they lost something. I hadn't lost a thing. If anything, I'd gained something. Confirmation, certainty. The moment they yanked my access without following the revocation protocol I'd written 3 years ago, the one buried inside the operations security handbook that no one ever read, they flipped a silent switch inside the system. A tripwire. A flag. Question asked in code, "Where's Evelyn?" And if the answer came back nowhere, the system would begin to forget how to do one very specific thing. A thing so vital, so quietly essential that nobody even thought about it until it didn't happen. I got in my car, drove east. No music, no phone. Just me and the quiet certainty that a countdown had begun. Not a bomb, not a fire, just silence. And soon it would get loud. First thing I did when I got home wasn't cry, wasn't drink, wasn't scream into a pillow while listening to Alanis on repeat. I made tea, strong, bitter oolong, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened a folder no one else on earth knew existed. Its name, Failsafes. I didn't hide it in some deep encrypted vault or disguise it as Tax's 2016 final. It sat plain as day on my local machine, right between system docs and recipes, because I knew no one would look. No one ever does. The arrogance of men like Damon is that they think control comes from deletion, wiping access, shredding folders, pressing buttons. But real control, it comes from being the one who built the damn buttons in the first place. Inside failsafes were 3 scripts, not destructive, not viral, surgical. I opened the third one, Circuit Breaker v3. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A single conditional statement that checked for a revoked admin token without a formal offboarding sequence. A scenario that only triggers if HR yanks the cord without following procedure, without the final passphrase, without me, and if triggered, the reconciliation engine simply forgets, not everything, just one critical job. A silent thread that crawls through cross-system ledgers and flags discrepancies between what our clients thought they settled and what actually moved. It doesn't scream. It doesn't crash. It just stops raising its hand. It goes mute, like me. I'd written it years ago during a particularly brutal month of patching code pushed by some caffeine-jacked Stanford intern who thought recursion was a vibe. Back then, it was just a thought experiment. What would happen if the wrong person pulled the plug without understanding the connections? What if someone like Damon walked in thinking the system was a stack of Lego bricks instead of a damn cathedral? So I gave the cathedral a single stone, deep in the foundation, that if removed the wrong way, made the roof sag in silence. I typed in one override command to confirm the condition. Simulate revocation check. The console lit green. Status, active monitoring. Trigger threshold, 24H post-token loss. Revocation protocol not detected. That's all I needed. I closed the laptop. Not a single line deleted. Not a single log tampered with, no breadcrumbs. Just one truth now in motion. They'd removed me without completing the ritual. The machine knew I was gone, and it was waiting. I tossed the laptop in my backpack, grabbed my keys, and drove 2 hours south to my sister's place in Cincinnati. She'd been bugging me to visit for months. Said the kids missed Aunt Evie. I figured if I was about to watch a software engine commit quiet, lawful sabotage, I might as well do it from somewhere with Legos underfoot and burnt grilled cheese for lunch. When I got there, I handed her my phone. "Turn it off," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Are we going off-grid or just dodging a stalker?" "Both," I said, half smiling. But the stalker's corporate and legally confused. She didn't ask more, just powered down the phone and tossed it in a drawer with old remotes and a half-dead Tamagotchi. I slept that night in the guest room, curled around a body pillow shaped like a dinosaur. The last thing I saw before I drifted off was a Power Rangers sticker peeling off the lamp. And somewhere in a server farm in Virginia, my system blinked quietly to itself. Watching, waiting, counting. Not for vengeance, for confirmation. Damon strutted into the Monday all-hands like a man who just wrestled a bear and won. "I'm thrilled to announce," he said, hands folded like a TED talker who practiced in front of a mirror, "that our reconciliation process is now fully automated. No more bottlenecks. No more legacy dependencies." He didn't say my name. He He didn't have to. Every engineer in that room knew exactly what legacy dependencies meant. Hell, half of them had learned the system from my diagrams, my onboarding videos, my annotated code comments signed A. Now those same devs were being told the engine ran itself, like magic, like a self-cleaning oven that just politely corrects billions of dollars in trades without human hands. One of the juniors, Jonas, fresh out of NYU, still saving up for a second monitor, raised a shaky hand. Who's reviewing the cross-thread queue merges? The ones that Evelyn used to. We've streamlined that into a microservice architecture. Damon interrupted a little too quickly. No need for manual review. The system self-validates, except it didn't, not really. Jonas nodded and slumped back in his chair, quietly opening a Jira ticket labeled Merge Queue Lag Issue. That was the beginning. Not of the end, not yet, but the first itch before the rash. A few missed flags here and there. Couple of trade records showing up late or marked with internal audit codes that didn't match any known protocol. Nothing fatal. Nothing you could print out and slap on a whiteboard, just digital discomfort. A quiet hum of wrongness that only people like me could hear. And I was nowhere to be found. Damon brushed off the first complaints. We're transitioning, he told the team. A little latency is normal. Vendor lag, cloud hiccups. Maybe a permissions desync. At Parallax, vendor lag was the new checks in the mail. Meanwhile, one of our clearinghouse clients, Resolvian Capital, big, quiet, always polite, sent a note to support. Hello, we're noticing some unusual delays in cross-market settlement confirmations. Can you confirm if these are expected? Support logged it as low urgency. Assigned it to a Tier 1 rep who'd been on the job for 3 weeks and still thought reconciliation meant apologizing to angry clients. She replied, thanks for flagging. We'll investigate and get back to you shortly. Smiling face with smiling eyes, she didn't, because no one told her what to look for. The system still looked healthy on the surface. The dashboards glowed green. The throughput looked normal. But beneath it, where the threads wove together and sanity checks whispered between modules, silence had taken root. One day, a senior engineer tried to trace a discrepancy in the Frankfurt window, opened the reconciliation log and found a curious gap. A time block where no flags had been thrown. Not low error rates, 0. Like someone had muted a fire alarm in a burning building. He filed a bug. No one responded. Damon saw the bug during his weekly review, chuckled, and muttered something about false positives from leftover swamp code. He didn't know that leftover swamp code was the only thing keeping the house from syncing. More emails trickled in, still noticing some oddities in time zone synchronization. Client record XJ432 is missing a net settlement marker. Are we phasing out cross-system validation? All flagged as non-critical, because the clients trusted the system. They didn't know Evelyn was gone. Didn't know that the silent checksum, the invisible conscience of Parallax, had been fired over coffee and buzzwords. As far as they knew, the engine still had its architect. Still had someone watching. Had a brain, but it didn't. It had Damon, and Damon had replaced oversight with optimism. By Friday, 3 separate clients had logged minor inconsistencies. Nothing big, not yet, but in the world of high-frequency trade reconciliation, nothing big is just something catastrophic in its first trimester. The system was still counting. Hour 93. Thread disabled. No one noticed. But silence always starts small. It started at 3:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time because, of course, chaos never clocks in politely. A batch job at the National Stock Exchange's reconciliation backend returned a mismatch rate 6 times higher than the daily ceiling. That triggered a cascading verification sweep, which triggered a subroutine alert, which finally, after wading through a flood of maybe it's a blip error logs, triggered a red flag tagged escalate, backend anomaly human review required. By 4:09 a.m., the Stock Exchange's operations director, Marissa Dunn, a woman who once survived a 3-day market freeze during a triple migration cycle, was on the phone with Parallax support. She wasn't angry yet. She was curious, which is worse. You can reason with angry. Curious gets under your skin and starts dissecting. The frontline tech who picked up the line was James, 23 years old, freshly minted from the support boot camp. Still thought recon flags had something to do with cybersecurity. Parallax support, this is James speaking, how can I? This is done with NSX Ops, Marissa cut in. I need Tier 3 escalation immediately. We're seeing unresolved discrepancies across all 3 foreign windows, Frankfurt, Seoul, and Sydney. Trades are showing as settled with no matching net movement. James froze. Ma'am, let me just log into the dashboard real quick. You won't see it from there. She snapped. The dashboard isn't the problem. The problem is your reconciliation thread is no longer reconciling. We've flagged over 42,000 trades with 0 backend validation. We need your architecture lead. James, sweating now, opened Slack and typed a message to the hash escalation channel. Does anyone know where Evelyn Hart is? Client wants her, no one responded, because Evelyn Hart didn't work there anymore. By 5:22 a.m., the CTO, Damon, was dragged out of bed by a flurry of pings and a very polite, very stern voicemail from legal that began with, "We need to discuss indemnity language, and you need to get on this call now." Damon joined the bridge line in a blur of bedhead and bravado. All right, what's going on? He said, half yawn, half performative calm. Marissa didn't miss a beat. You've got a silent failure in your cross-validation logic. Either your reconciliation engine's gone rogue or someone turned off its ability to throw flags. That's not possible, Damon said, instantly regretting the sentence. I mean, the system would have logged any code-level changes. We checked your logs, Marissa replied. Your engine's been eating discrepancies for 3 days, quietly, systematically, with no external alerts. Damon clicked through the admin panel. Everything looked normal, which was somehow worse. It's green across the board, he said, voice climbing. No crash reports. No failed jobs. No, wait, hold on. He found the error logs, started scrolling, then stopped. There it was. A single function call in the reconciliation thread, check cross discrepancy flag. Disabled, he blinked. It wasn't commented out. It wasn't deleted. It was disabled. By a conditional wrapper, if admin token equals null and offboard flag equals true, disable flag checks. Kind of logic that wouldn't trigger unless someone's access was revoked without running the formal offboarding sequence, which is exactly what he'd done to Evelyn. He clicked into the system docs, not the glossed-up Confluence pages he had the juniors maintain, but the original legacy docs. The ones tagged A archive, the ones no one had opened in months. Right there, in bold red text, do not remove or modify discrepancy thread checks. This function governs all multi-market trade validation. Removing or disabling this will not produce visible system errors, but will result in unflagged discrepancies and unrecoverable downstream errors. If unsure, consult A immediately. He checked the last time the file had been opened, not once since Evelyn's departure. He clicked into Slack, typed her name. Nothing came up. I don't understand, he muttered. Marissa's voice sliced through the silence. You didn't read her documentation, did you? He tried to answer, but all that came out was air. Because she was right. No one had, no one ever does. By 7:00 a.m., 6 financial institutions had logged incident reports. By 7:30, legal was on call with the compliance team discussing exposure. By 8 o'clock, the CEO's phone lit up with a single message: Parallax backend failure. NSX requesting emergency audit. Call me now. The silence Evelyn had planted was blooming. And Damon? He was drowning in green dashboards that told him everything was fine, while the system quietly screamed. The emergency meeting was called at 9:11 a.m. sharp. The subject line in everyone's inbox read simply, "Stop everything." Damon sat at the head of the long glass conference table in the 11th floor war room, hunched over his MacBook like a man trying to hotwire a spaceship with a butter knife. His hoodie was wrinkled, his jaw twitching. He hadn't shaved, he hadn't slept. He hadn't blinked in what felt like 20 minutes. Across from him sat CFO Lena Durand, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys and 1 IT audit specialist flown in overnight from Chicago. The CTO of NSX, Marissa Dunn, was dialed in via video, her face cool and distant on the oversized monitor, like a disappointed school principal watching a very stupid child squirm. Damon launched into his usual dance. We believe the issue stems from a previously undocumented configuration in the legacy architecture. There may have been overlooked flags during the transition to the new validation framework. The audit specialist, a bald man named Trevor who looked like he could spot tax fraud in a birthday card, and even look up from his legal pad. So what you're saying, Lena said slowly, is that you replaced a core component of our settlement system without a full code audit? Damon's jaw twitched. We ran unit tests. Did you run a sign-off protocol? Look, it was a standard refactor. Nothing destructive. The module was legacy-bound, and I had the team working on migrating to a more containerized architecture. Trevor looked up, deadpan. Did you or did you not receive architectural sign-off from the previous owner? Silence. Damon's throat clicked. That's when the junior dev, Jonas, the one who still had a post-it on his monitor that said remember, Grep is your friend, finally spoke up. Oh, why don't we just ask Evelyn? You could hear a pin drop. Damon didn't scoff, he laughed, sharp, nervous, desperate. She's gone. She's been gone. She doesn't work here. And frankly, this architecture should have been re-owned months ago. Marissa leaned forward on the video feed. Did you follow formal offboarding? Damon looked confused. We revoked access. No, said Trevor, tapping the desk. Formal offboarding. With handoff, transfer of intellectual oversight, signatory chain confirmation, and the system custodianship clause invoked. What clause? Damon asked, eyebrows scrunched. Lena looked at the attorneys. One of them, Kira, sharp as a guillotine in a gray blazer, flipped open a paper file. Clause 12b9, she said. The original employment contract Evelyn Hart signed under Parallax pre-acquisition. It was preserved during the merge under Employee Legacy Exception Policy. Damon blinked. That was years ago. We're in a new stack. The clause isn't about the stack, Kira said. It's about architecture-level control. Specifically, any component Evelyn personally authored, defined in the contract as any module with more than 80% code attribution, remains her legal custodianship until formally released via documented offboarding. Trevor added, that means the architecture still belongs to her, not legally transferred, not re-signed. So technically she's still the only authorized signatory. Wait, Damon laughed again, a panicked flutter in his throat. You're telling me she owns the code? Like owns it. Until you offboard her properly, said Kira. And since you didn't, Lena said flatly, any changes made after her removal, including disabling her function threads, violate contractual custodianship. The floor didn't just fall out, it swallowed him whole. His face drained of color. He looked down at his laptop, at the reconciliation engine logs, at the client escalation thread with subject lines like urgent, settlement holdup causing client panic. He looked back up. How the hell was I supposed to know that? Kira didn't blink by reading her contract. Lena folded her hands and the documentation, which she left thoroughly, in 3 locations. Marissa, still on video, leaned back. This is why you don't replace engineers before understanding what they built, especially ones who wrote the damn engine. Jonas spoke again, voice soft. She always said the system was alive, that it knew if it was being handled wrong. Everyone stared at him. Sorry, he muttered, just something she said once. Didn't make sense at the time, it made sense now. The machine had noticed, and it had quietly shut its eyes, waiting for its maker. And she was nowhere to be found. The call didn't come from Damon, of course not. By then he was too busy hemorrhaging credibility and pit-staining through every shirt he owned. No, the call came from someone with an actual stake in the company's survival, Cliff Randall. Board director, early investor, and the kind of man whose voice always sounded like it had just finished a $1,200 stake. He didn't waste time. Evelyn, Cliff Randall here. We're in a bit of a bind. I was sitting on my sister's back porch, watching her twins chase a squirrel with Nerf guns. Her dog, Bingo, was chewing on what I prayed wasn't a sock. I held the phone between 2 fingers like it might leak something unpleasant. Damon lose the manual? I asked deadpan. Cliff chuckled the way rich men do when they're not sure if they're being mocked. Let's just say a critical component of the reconciliation thread appears to have disengaged. Without warning. Legal's gone through the architecture documentation and your name keeps showing up. A lot. I took a sip of iced tea, it should. I wrote most of it, and the code, same. He paused, letting that sit like a warm beer in a boardroom. I'd like to bring you back in on a short-term basis, just to stabilize the engine and restore full operation. I'd prefer not to be involved, I said, gently, like I was declining an invitation to a party hosted by people who once stole my lunch and called it synergy. But I am available, as a contractor. Cliff didn't argue, just exhaled, sharp and tired. Terms, I'll send a PDF. It hit his inbox 10 minutes later. Contractor proposal, Evelyn Hart, rate $10,000/HR, minimum block, 10 hours, paid in full in advance, session window, remote access only, NDA waived on my end, deliverable. System stabilization, architecture continuity, required. Public written acknowledgement of original custodianship rights, to be filed with board meeting notes and updated investor disclosures. Cliff called back. This is steep. Not as steep as a class action lawsuit filed by NSX clearing partners for multi-market reconciliation failure. You know about the NSX call? I know about everything, I said. That's the perk of writing the system. It still talks to me, Cliff, even when you don't. Silence, then, can you fix it? I didn't break it. He sighed. The next email was from legal, then finance, then a wire transfer receipt, $100,000. MO line, contractor agreement system custodian, Evelyn Hart. I clicked the confirmation, opened a secure session from my laptop, and slid back into the console like I'd never left. The system felt off, like a cat with a limp, not broken, not bleeding, but unsettled. My cursor hovered over the dormant thread. The one I'd built to whisper through the pipes and make sure no trade ever got buried, no error left unflagged. The one they'd silenced when they silenced me. I ran a diagnostic. Thread check, dormant, status, conditional suppression active. I smiled, of course it was. In 30 lines of code, I began the reversal. Carefully, like a surgeon reattaching a nerve, no drama, no big bang, just precision. Behind me, my niece yelled, Aunt Evie, I named my hamster after you. She hides snacks in her cheeks and watches everyone like she doesn't trust them. Smart girl, I said, not turning around. As the final line executed, the thread flickered back to life. Quiet, steady, like a lighthouse relit after a storm. I wrote one final log entry, system restored by A, session recorded. Custodian key verified, then I logged out. That night, I forwarded one last email to the board. Subject, final deployment. Attachment, a PDF copy of the original architecture sign-off contract, because I wasn't mad. I wasn't bitter. I was just finally done. And I wanted them to know it. Damon didn't speak during the session. Not once. He was there, his name lit up in the corner of the Zoom call like a stubborn ghost, but his camera stayed off, his mic muted. Probably sitting in his office with the blinds drawn, sweat drying under a hoodie he didn't earn, watching the woman he tried to erase restore the system he never bothered to understand. The CFO, Lena, did speak. She sounded like someone peeling duct tape off her soul. We've wired the retainer, she said. I saw it, I replied, already logged in through the secure tunnel. The system greeted me like a familiar dog, skittish from neglect, but ready to follow orders. I pulled up the core validation module. There it was, just like I left it, cradled in conditionals and comments. Check cross-discrepancy flag. Right arrow disabled, buried like a landmine with a bright red comet floating above it. If you touch this, you'd better know what you're doing. I pinged the checksum thread, checked the audit tail, and compared the token chain. The sequence had failed exactly the way I designed it to if they ever fired me like a broken appliance, cutting off my admin key without running the formal offboarding function. A system like this doesn't need revenge code. It just needs boundaries, and I gave it one. I opened the suppression gate, reactivated the discrepancy sweeper, and ran a parallel validation across 3 markets. The errors lit up instantly. Discrepancies like cancerous cells under fluorescent light, thousands of them, sleeping quietly in the bloodstream of global trade. 30 minutes, that's all it took. 30 minutes to reverse the rot. I locked in the changes, committed the session, and uploaded the confirmation bundle to the legal archive server. Then I logged out, shut the terminal, and finally exhaled. My phone buzzed, an email from legal. Thank you for your rapid support. Would you be open to continued contracting as we migrate to full oversight? I hit reply, typed 1 sentence. Consider this my final deployment. CC'd the board, attached the system snapshot, clicked send. Then I walked away from my desk, ordered a drink I didn't name, and watched the sun smear itself across the horizon like it was trying to apologize for the day. Damon would survive this. Men like him always do, at least on paper. He'd blame inherited code and transition gaps. He'd nod solemnly on some earnings call, maybe even throw in a buzzword or two. Learning moment, architectural awareness, humbled leadership. But the damage was done, not the trade errors, not the client escalations, not even the board scrutiny. The real damage, everyone now knew the truth, that he broke something sacred, that the system didn't fail him. He failed the system, and I was no longer the ghost in the machine. I was the architect of its resurrection, on my terms, and with one click I was gone. The boardroom smelled like panic disguised as aftershave. No one spoke as the final incident report was distributed, 12 pages of fallout, client complaints, trade discrepancies, and quiet internal admissions that the system failure had been entirely preventable. The CEO, Gregory Mills, sat at the head of the table, jaw locked so tight it looked like it had been wired shut. Across from him, Damon sat 2 seats too far from the action, like he already knew he'd been exiled from relevance. He wore a black button-down like he thought it might make him look older, wiser. All it did was highlight the sweat at his collar. Cliff Randall was first to speak. I'd like to begin by reading from Evelyn Hart's original handoff memo, dated 2 weeks before her removal. He held up a single sheet, yellowed slightly at the edges like even the printer had tried to warn them. Subject, Final Recommendations Custodial Framework for Reconciliation Threads Timestamp, 8:47 a.m., 2 Fridays before termination. Read receipts? None. Cliff cleared his throat. To ensure continuity, the cross-market discrepancy logic must not be disabled under any circumstance without formal custodianship transfer and offboarding protocol. The architecture assumes persistent oversight. If mishandled, the system will enter a silent lockdown mode. Trigger, Improper access revocation. Please confirm formal offboarding procedures before proceeding. He set it down with the delicacy of a tombstone. Another director, Janice Wung, finance side, razor sharp, opened a leather binder. There's also this, she said. Clause 12b9 from Evelyn's employment contract. I quote, any architecture authored and maintained over a majority threshold 80% plus remains in custodial control of the employee until properly offboarded via formal documentation and mutual sign-off. She looked at Damon. You didn't offboard her. He started to speak, but stopped. The room was too quiet for spin. Gregory finally broke the silence. I want to be crystal clear, he said, voice low and calm. You fired our lead architect, revoked her credentials without protocol, disabled a critical validation thread, and then blamed vendor lag while trades went unflagged for 3 days? Damon started, then floundered. She left no clear chain. No signal this would happen. The code was messy. It wasn't messy, Janice snapped. She timestamped, documented, annotated, and left a literal warning in the Slack thread. She clicked her laptop. The screen behind them lit up. Slack archive, channel #in for core. Evelyn Hart, Friday, 6:03 p.m. Note to all, if mishandled, the system will silently disable recon checks. Trigger, Improper access revocation. Please confirm formal offboarding procedures before proceeding. This is not a drill. Damon closed his eyes. Gregory stood. You replaced her, he said, quiet now, without reading the contract, without understanding the system, without asking the one person who could have told you how the thing breathes. He looked around the room, then back to Damon. Now we'll replace you. No theatrics, no firing squad. Just a decision passed like a knife sliding into soft wood. The kind that's been waiting. Damon didn't argue. He didn't pack up. He didn't cry. He just sat there, head lowered, hands folded, while the company he tried to rebuild decided to rebuild without him. The board filed out. Gregory lingered, holding Evelyn's memo like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He read the last line out loud to himself. I wasn't the problem. I was the checksum. You failed the test. He looked at the paper and quietly finally understood. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.